Okay, so the bicep femoris, one of the three hamstring muscles. It's the most lateral in positioning, and I believe it's also the longest of the hamstring muscles, which gives it the longest moment arm length as well, but we'll get into that later. So my project was on two exercises: the conventional stiff-legged deadlift, which is just basically you're standing straight up with soft knees, solid hip hinge, and you're bending just at the waist and keeping tension through the hamstrings because it's a hamstring exercise. And the single leg stiff-legged deadlift, which is the same exact thing except on one leg. So the question being asked is, during which exercise is the bicep femoris more activated? During the single leg stiff-legged deadlift, or the conventional stiff-legged deadlift. So 3 trials of each were ran with an EMG attached here to the origin of the bicep femoris, which is right up at the ischial tuberosity, I believe, and then down at the top of the fibula, right below the knee joint. So this is the insertion, that's the origin. I connected an EMG at both of those places. And then the 3 trials were ran. I used my roommate, Connor. He's a very well-trained athlete. He's pretty strong, so I thought he would be a great person to use. You know, I always like studies personally that include already trained athletes rather than newbies, beginners, you know, because things don't necessarily apply the same to them, but this would, so that's kind of irrelevant. Anyways, so like I said, the EMG was attached to the origin and the insertion. 3 trials were ran of the conventional, and then 3 trials were ran of the single-legged, stiff-legged deadlifts. And here are the results. Now, you don't really need to see the specificities of these graphs. All you need to understand is, boom, right here, this is the peak activation the conventional reached, basically. So, as you can see, clearly, these graphs are the same size. The single-leg stiff-legged deadlift had way more spikes, way more overall activation than the conventional. So my thought behind this, or the reasoning behind this, was that during the stiff-legged deadlift, the foot placement is a little bit varied compared to the conventional, which means conventional toes are usually more forward. During the single leg, they're going to be slightly farther out to make up for some balance, as well as slightly more knee flexion. And what that's going to do is it's going to make up for that stability, and it's also going to secure the hip a little bit more. But in doing so, it activates the bicep femoris all that much more, because you have 3 hamstring muscles: the semimembranosus, which I believe is fully activated at full knee flexion, and then the semimembranosus, which is fully activated at full knee extension, or 70 to 100 degrees approximately. And then you have the semitendinosus, which is activated from much lower degrees, basically full knee flexion. And then you have the bicep femoris, which is like right in between. It's 50 degrees to 80 degrees of knee flexion is where you're going to activate the bicep femoris long and short head the most. I believe as that ratio goes up, the more the short head's activated. But yeah, literally doing the slightly varied foot placement and the slightly more flexed the knee positioning is going to actually put your bicep femoris in the most optimal positioning to be activated the most, right in that 50 to 80 degree range. And I believe that's why the single leg stiff-legged deadlift is I believe that's the reason why the single leg stiff-legged deadlift was able to activate the bicep femoris all that much more. So in conclusion, if solid activation of the bicep femoris can't be reached during full knee flexion while using a leg curl machine, and it also can't be fully achieved while doing full knee hip extension exercises like the stiff-legged deadlift, then a slightly modified multi-joint hip extension and slight knee flexion exercise must be the answer. And that is literally the definition of the single leg stiff-legged deadlift. Really cool. This is cool for me too because I'm going to incorporate these way more into my own personal training. And yeah, thanks for watching.